Hello, listeners, and welcome to another episode of Subscription Scaled. I'm your host, Nick Frederick. With me today is subscription industry veteran Jason Roos. Jason, welcome to the show today.
Thanks for having me, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to take a little bit of a different format today because you've had some different experiences in your background that I think we can dive into. But why don't we start there? Tell us about how you got into the subscription industry at Steepster and other places and where you're at today.
Sure. It all goes back about 13 years. Coming out of college, I had degrees in writing and philosophy and a minor in Spanish, so not a lot of direct job applications or opportunities that I was aware of. But coincidentally, I ended up working in tech as a product manager with a buddy of mine who I went to school with that was out in Minnesota. So just a fortuitous turn of events that sort of set me on the path that eventually took me through subscriptions and subscription commerce. But we were there working at a company building websites for local news stations, did that for about a year. And then it was around 2009, we ended up moving out to New York City to start our own company where we were incubating and developing our own web products, mobile apps, that sort of thing, trying to figure out what could stick and make a business for ourselves.
Might as well go to the place where a whole lot of businesses exist.
Yeah, exactly. It was definitely a big change from Minnesota as well, and anything that we had grown up with. But yeah, it seemed like the land of opportunity, especially outside of San Francisco in terms of tech. And we had some roots there and had done some work there previously, so it was a natural fit for us. So we went out there, met up with a third guy named Jack Chang, who became a third co-founder for a company that we were building these products for, or we were building our own products. One of those, the first products that we created was a community for tea drinkers called Steepster. And that is where I had some of my most direct experience with subscription commerce. We ended up running 2 different Tea of the Month clubs as part of that community, just another offering to the audience. But that was one of the first products we made. We made a few other ones. Eventually, the most successful thing to come out of that trio of us working was a web consultancy where essentially we were building websites, mobile apps for media companies in New York, which was a nice fit because New York tends to be pretty media focused. So we did that for a few years, had some good success, grew our team to about 10, 11 people. And at that point, we said, hey, this is working really well, but we're all interested on really being a true startup and building our own stuff. So we shut down the consulting side of the business and focused on developing and incubating our own product, which happened to be, it was something called Memberly, this was 2011, around there, a platform for running your own subscription business. So this was...
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we're at the early wave of when subscription commerce was really becoming popular. Poised, I think the big one back then was Birchbox makeup subscription, and we modeled a lot of our stuff off of that. But we said, hey, this is a really interesting time. This is an interesting model that what we want to do is use this model to help people who are passionate and really talented at certain things that they don't know how to do as their main job right now. They're just doing it as a side gig. So we want to use this model to help them make that side gig their main job. Platform, got some funding for it, ran that for a couple of years. Eventually, we weren't able to grow fast enough to get to a level of sustainability that was enough for us. And so we ended up closing that. And that's when we had to restructure. We lost all of our employees. And then my buddy, who I had originally started working with, we just started doing some more freelance stuff, ended up doing some work again on Steepster, the tea community site. But what eventually really became the big success out of that was we did an evolution of our web consultancy and created a new one that's called Able. And my buddy is the CEO of that. I no longer work there, but that has been running since 2015. That may be wrong. I don't remember exactly, but yeah, somewhere around there. But it's had a lot of success and upwards of 100 employees. And so I was there for about 5 years, and that took me through the end of last year, which I actually just ended up leaving, but really because I was interested in pursuing some other professional opportunities, and I've actually been working to transition into working on film, which is something that I've always been interested in and have some opportunities with some family members and things like that. So that's a rough overview of my journey to this point.
Well, that's quite a journey, and it's clear you have that entrepreneurial spirit of looking for opportunities and wanting to try something different and do what's next, and just look at what you think the market needs and trying to pursue that. That's quite a diverse and experienced background. I'm excited to dive into some of this.
Cool.
One question I had in what you were just explaining, though, were you running Steepster and Memberly at the same time?
Yeah, since Steepster was an existing property for us, and at the point that we started focusing on Memberly, the platform, Steepster had been around for a handful of years and had slowly grown to a pretty substantial size. It pretty quickly became the largest community for tea drinkers online, which I don't mean to toot my own horn because it's mostly an uncompeted space, but it was for many years getting regularly 100,000, 200,000 unique visitors a month. So it was pretty substantial and something that we thought we could do something with, at least turn it into a real business, whereas historically it had mostly just been a free site for tea aficionados to share their passion, discover new teas, that sort of thing. But we actually since Steepster existed and we were starting Memberly, we used Steepster as not a proof of concept. We became our own customers on Memberly to try to make sure we fully understood the problems of the people that we were trying to help out, really understand the space. As part of launching Memberly and creating these tools for people to run a subscription service, we also created and ran a subscription service on Steepster, which was a Tea of the Month Club, which sent out I think it was something like 10 ounces of 3 different teas. So it was like a tea sampler every month, and we'd do some editorial content and try to create unique, lasting interactions with customers beyond a single transaction, recurring transactions, get to know their preferences, have them get more value out of us than just the use of a single product. So that's a long way of saying yes, we were running both at the same time.
Oh no, that's good. It's all nice color. I think the point that I take away there that I think was extremely valuable and probably still is, was that you were literally eating your own dog food there. It's like it wasn't just a product that you were trying to push onto the market. You were like, we're testing this thing out regularly on our own product, working out the bugs and figuring out what those requirements are, and then trying to take that to the market, which it's not exactly the same as how we've developed our product, but it's very similar in the sense that we took real world examples of working with subscription merchants on our consulting side of our business, the kind of problems that we saw day in and day out them running into, and really tried to build those into our product rather than, again, saying, this is what we think you need, and then trying to push that on them. We were like, no, we've seen merchants have these problems with maximizing the collections and recycling payments, down to being able to handle multiple products and bundling them together, and different currencies and presentment schedules and multiple acquirers and all those complexities that especially larger merchants tend to deal with. Certainly the same concept there. So that's why I came back to it, because it just sounded so familiar, of not just sitting in a closet and trying to design your own product, but actually using the real world to let that almost be your designer.
Yeah, I think it's definitely an interesting and unique situation that not everyone in the tech space gets to take advantage of. So much of web development is knowing your customers, knowing their problems, being intimately familiar with whatever their life cycle or their workflow or anything like that, whatever you're trying to do to solve their problem, making sure you actually understand that problem. I personally believe it can cut both ways, though, because it does mean a lot when you are experiencing those customer problems yourself. That's a great way to know that, hey, we've actually validated these problems. They are real problems. We're not just being I don't know if misled is the right way to describe it, or we're just chasing some problem without really understanding how significant of a problem that is for the customer. So it's a great way to validate those problems. But to that point, you're very quickly in a space where now I'm actually experiencing these problems. So I want to make sure I solve them, even though maybe strategically the business would be better served by growing in other areas or solving other problems that you're not directly experiencing at that point. That'll always be the balance that you need to work in when developing any web product.
I agree with you more. And I think you have to factor in where your business is at in terms of its life cycle, right? Because when you're a startup, going and pulling something off the shelf that you can plug in and get up and running quickly, that's usually the right answer. It doesn't make sense to go build it yourself or to even go through those pains when you can potentially use someone else's product that factors those things in. At the same time, you start to grow and scale, and inevitably your business becomes more complicated. And sometimes those off the shelf products are walled gardens that you just really can't go outside of. So either they can't handle the volume or they can't handle the complexity. And sometimes it's both, but you find yourself stuck there too. It's a double-edged sword, right? So because it's so relevant, I'm interested in talking about it, but were there specific things that when you were building up Steepster and then decided to create this other product that you were like, yeah, this is absolutely something that we learned that we think everybody else is going to need, that we built into our core product? What were some of those things that you saw that you were like, okay, everybody needs this, definitely something we're going to put in it?
That's an interesting question because, to be honest, I don't know if we ever got to the point where we really built those into Memberly. I would say there's some things that I'd point to, or at least one in particular that was a core founding principle of Memberly, but I don't know if we ever were able to fully execute on it. And I think what I would say that is creating a true relationship between a customer and a business. And the reason I say that is one of the original premises of Steepster was, in terms of creating a tea community, is like, how can we make more relevant recommendations for consumers? We ended up working on tea because one of our co-founders he had the idea for Steepster. He had gotten into tea, was a big tea person. And then Mike and I, we came in at more from a business perspective of saying, how can we apply a model to a vertical or a space that really focuses on creating quality recommendations? And the thesis there was, we need to help people understand each other through frequent interactions, so that when someone says, hey, I drank this tea and this is what I think about it, you actually understand how those tastes and those preferences relate to your own. So the recommendations coming from that becomes so much more meaningful. So I'd say that seed continued into Memberly to say, how do we create actual meaningful relationships between the business and the customer? It's not just, oh, I bought a single product and great, it works, or it doesn't, I don't know. Frequent interactions, which goes hand in hand with subscriptions, diving into helping the journey of someone saying, here's how I react to all of the teas that you sent me, and help understanding then how they relate to the recommendations we've given them. Because part of the Tea of the Month Club benefit of having it on Steepster is they get sent specific teas, and then they can log those teas and rate them, and that feeds into their tea log. And so we can see how people are reacting to that and further refine the teas that we put in next month, or teas that we may recommend to them. So that's what I would point to say, yeah, going beyond just a superficial single transactional relationship and creating something more deep and meaningful. But to be honest, like, the product was always relatively young. We had a couple years to work on it, which maybe on the web in the web world, that's actually pretty substantial. So maybe I'm downplaying some of our failures a bit, but I felt that we were still in a place where we were trying to get some of the table stakes done of helping subscriptions just run. And with the audience that we were targeting, which is people have a day job and we're trying to get them to make their side hustle their main job, that's an uphill battle, because by definition, they're not focusing on it. And in a lot of cases, they didn't have a predefined audience. They didn't have that yet. If a subscription comes on and they want to start a person comes on and wants to start a subscription, they have a great idea. That's awesome. But we were still early enough in the life cycle of the product where we weren't able to help them get a lot of customers. So unless they brought the customers with them, it was hard to make that successful. So we were still trying to solve that problem before we got to, okay, now we need to make it a really meaningful relationship. So that's the big thing. That was a premise of Steepster, premise of Memberly, and something that we tried to get in there, but I just don't think we ever fully achieved that.
Yeah, I'm interested to dive in there a little bit more because if I think about what we do, yeah, it sounds like there was some overlap with what you guys did at Memberly, but when I try to tell people where we come into play, it's usually from the buy button forward.
Mm-hmm.
Once you've decided that you've solicited the customer, you've shown them the products, and then the customer says, okay, now I want to select this product, give you my information, give you my credit card or payment method, and then self-care online, cancel, upgrade, downgrade. We can handle all of that, both from the front end and then the back end subscription lifecycle management. We can do both of those things. Some come to us and we're like, how should we lay out this page? What should this user journey be as they're coming onto our site? We can execute anyone's vision, but we're really not the ones that are there going, well, you maybe should tell them about the product first and take them through 2 pages before getting them to even asking them if they want to join, Is that where you guys were trying to focus as well as further upstream? And do you have any insights there? Because that has never been our area of expertise.
Yeah, I think most of what we ended up doing, we're technologists and we're product people, so we definitely had some interesting and very good looking storefronts. So we could help with that flow of how do you talk about your project? How do you present it in a good light? What's the best way to put a customer through that flow to get to the final purchase confirmation, which would then eventually lead into all the stuff they're talking about. It's like now you're doing order management and logistics and that, how do you fulfill an order? So we had some stuff there, but for me, there's 2 big sides to the problem, assuming you have a good product that you want to sell, which is like the sales and marketing problem up front and then a logistics problem afterwards. But that sales and marketing problem where you're saying like, hey, here's the flow of seeing the product to getting to that order button. Like you've gotten someone to that page where you can tell them about it. And that is where I think we never were as successful as we needed to be. We started transitioning over the course of Memberly to target people that had more established audiences, more established customer bases, so that it wasn't as much a lift to make sure it was successful. Because I'd say ultimately, if you have people that are willing to pay for something, you can probably figure out most of the rest of it. Logistics is very intimidating, and that's really an uphill battle, but it's even more intimidating if you don't have someone that's willing to give you money. Yeah, we focused on stuff, we had some stuff, but it was still not early enough in the cycle. There wasn't enough. We weren't talking with people that really knew how to market themselves, how to go find customers if they didn't already have them. So ultimately, however ideal or optimized we made that flow to a purchase button didn't really matter if there was no one getting to that.
Right. Yeah. You can't take them through the sales funnel if they're not coming in the top of the funnel.
Yep, exactly.
So I think you said when you started Steepster, there wasn't a subscription offering, right? It was more of a community site?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And then added those, and now it sounds like those have been taken off again.
Yeah. So, and actually, I forgot to say this up front that it was last year we ended up selling Steepster to Adagio Teas, which is a tea company that actually sells tea, but they're one of the most savvy in terms of doing digital stuff, and they've built out a number of independent properties, and so they seem like a great fit for it. So we've since sold it. None of the original creators are are involved with it in any official capacity anymore. So that's clear that I'm not representing them in any way, but this is all different.
You're not wearing the polo today. Got it.
Yeah. Exactly. But now, I'm sorry, you were saying.
I was curious about the evolution of when you went from a community site, no commerce on it, to adding in that subscription offering where you were sending a few a month, and then did you remove subscription from the site before selling it, or was that a decision they made?
Yeah, we did remove it before selling it, but that was like many years before selling it. So the journey to make Steepster financially viable was many ups and downs. We tried a bunch of different stuff. It did start as a free community where we were just trying to gain traction, gain users, get people to start rating and logging teas. Once that was working for a good amount, then we said, okay, how do we monetize this? We tried a number of things, including affiliate sales, daily deals, direct sales, sourcing and selling some of our own teas, which is always a little tough when you're an independent tea community. So that was always, we wanted to be sensitive with that. But one of the early options was, okay, Tea of the Month Club, because also it's a great way. We felt the community really catered towards, maybe we're getting a lot more into tea knowledge than you were initially expecting, but it catered towards a lot of people that were obviously greater enthusiasts and more dedicated tea drinkers versus someone who drinks the occasional Lipton tea bag. These are people a lot of times that are drinking premium loose leaf teas. But one of the beliefs was, what's the best way to get someone to get into loose leaf tea, get into premium tea, or just even try other teas? You got to get the tea in front of them. It's hard to just say it online, like they actually have to try it. So that seemed like a really natural fit for us to say, hey, let's do a sampler subscription. It's a great way to introduce new teas to people. It can act as their monthly tea supply and just grow from there. In the first iteration, so we ended up doing a subscription twice on Steepster. The first one grew to maybe a few hundred people, but given the challenges of making that sustainable, because at that same time we were primarily focusing on Memberly. So we had just split our attention too much. So we weren't growing Steepster enough and the subscriptions on there. And then also we were primarily focused on Memberly, which, as I've talked about, was a great platform and a lot of fun, but we weren't finding the success that we needed to make it live or have a long life. So our focus was split, and when we decided to shut down Memberly, it also made sense to stop doing the tea subscription, because we weren't then going to invest in building tools or starting that up on its own, because again, it was really a dog fooding exercise, and let's be our own customers on Memberly. So that was the first iteration and why we ended up shutting it down. We ended up coming back to it a second time, like I mentioned, or actually I may have not have mentioned it, but coming back to it a second time a few years later, after we had shuttered our first web consultancy. And that was because we were freelancing again. We were looking around for work and trying to make stuff stick. And Steepster was still in the background kicking around, slowly growing, still with a good size of monthly uniques. And hey, let's go back and try to make it work again. We did some tweaks to the subscription model. We did like less tea, a greater number of samples, so it could really be a good introduction. And we brought in a really great tea expert to help us out, and we gave it a shot. That one, we ended up partnering. We did a deal through Living Social, I think it was, and we're able to get some great success from there, like up to 1,000 customers, which was 3 times what it was in our previous iteration. But we couldn't extend the lifetime value of those customers. So after 3 months, about 3 months, a lot of them were gone, and it didn't sustain itself.
Were there, in those 2 iterations, was there any differences in the offering? Was it a subscription of the month club, 3 teas for a set price, or what was the difference?
It was very similar. The main difference was the first one was just a lot bigger samples, and there's 3 of them. And then the second one was smaller samples, but more of them. I think we had 5 of them. And it was 10 grams versus, I'm forgetting, maybe 3 ounces on the, I can't do the conversion right now. It was a lot bigger. Like basically we were trying to manage some of the costs to make it a little bit more sustainable. We trimmed down on some of the editorial that we had been doing with the first version, which I always loved and it was fun to do. But it was more or less the same offering, around $20 as for 3 to 5 teas. And then if you did a 3-month subscription or a 6 or 12-month, then you would get some sort of price reduction on paying up front.
Yeah.
So I guess to that point, there were some evolutions and iterations based on what we had learned from the first time running the subscription. But I would say, honestly, it was more just a second attempt to try to monetize the Steepster audience. So feeling like we hadn't really done it justice the first time, so giving it another shot, because we still felt that the fundamental principle of the subscription was probably sound, and it was more just that upfront sales funnel question. Can we convert X% of the Steepster visitors into subscription customers? We think it's a great way to discover teas. We think it's a great way to develop a deeper relationship with teas, to have them understand who we are, have them get involved in the community. So fundamentally, it was very similar, but yeah, more of just let's try to make this work, and hopefully it can become a thing that sustains us. But it didn't work out that way.
So that the living social promotion that you did was interesting. Did that drive brand new people to the site, or was that a way to motivate existing Steepster users, community users, to take advantage of a special offer?
It was primarily new people. So, and which is the great thing of working with people that have an established audience. Living Social, I haven't really kept up with them, but I don't know if they've sold or anything like that, but they were huge back in that time. Only set to Groupon at the back then.
Well, it's one of those, when you said the word, I was like, man, I haven't heard that company name in a really long time. Are they even still around?
They may have been bought or merged
probably
with somebody.
Probably by Groupon.
Yeah, but yeah, it was mostly Living Social people, which presented its own challenge because great, we got a bunch of new customers, but they were not the Steepster audience. So it's people that are their audience is people looking for deals on products, not people that are looking to join a tea community and develop a deeper relationship with tea. It was definitely worthwhile and a good shot, but ultimately we weren't able to convert enough of those people into those tea enthusiasts to maintain the subscription, continue building the community, all that sort of stuff. So the success from there was a bit short-lived.
Well, back when you guys were doing it, was there any competition, tea subscription services, and are there any now?
There are a few. They're mostly small, and I haven't kept up with it as much as I should have. I think probably a few years ago, the bigger one was, I'm forgetting the name, some company based in India, which is basically they've done a lot of work to secure sourcing rights for teas direct from the plantation, so sort of plantation to consumer type model, and as part of their direct selling offerings that they would offer a subscription. So I think they got some considerable tech investment too, especially for a tea company. So that was probably one of the bigger ones, but there have been other similar tea sampler things. I haven't kept up with it much.
I'm asking because I think it's interesting. One of the things that I've talked to a lot of different founders like yourself that have started up what I would call niche subscription services, like serving a very focused community. And the one advantage that all of them have that even Amazon you could set up for subscribe and save on tea there if that's what you really want to do. But what they don't have is a community around other people who are interested in it, even people who work in the business that are focused on it and care about it and writing the editorials that you talked about. They don't have that. They're never going to have that. That's not their thing. And that level of, customer engagement, which is really what we're all trying for here in the subscription business, right? We want people engaged with our products who are more than willing to continue to pay the $10, $20 a month, whatever it is that you're going to charge them, and continue to get value out of it. Not just the same one thing showing up on my doorstep all the time, but it's everything else that can go along with it when you're talking about a very specific product. And from those that I've known over the years who drank tea, and I work in IT, and I know a whole lot of engineers who that's their thing. They their tea, and you got the steeping things on their desk, and we got scents going everywhere, but they're very in it. They're very ingrained in it, and they love it. They love the community. They love talking about it. They'll talk your ear off about it. So that level of engagement seems like it would lend very well towards a subscription offering that could keep introducing them to new things, or maybe even letting them say that, hey, for the next 6 months, I really like this tea, keep sending it to me, or something like that. So it seems like it's, the type of product that would do well with that. Now, with that said, it's a very niche product. It's not coffee, so you're going to have some headwinds there, but still seems like something that's very conducive to that. You just got to have realistic growth expectations.
Yeah, and to be honest, like tea has grown. It's not big in the US. It's definitely grown a lot. And that was over the past decade, especially, it's become way more mainstream. Especially you have matcha has been a big thing of popping up different matcha stores, in the New York area, especially. So, and it's multi-billion-dollar industry. It's big, not quite like coffee and not ingrained in the US culture the same way it is. We were looking at that too. I was like, hey, it's not coffee, but this is pretty big. So if we can really make this work, there's a lot of opportunity here, a lot of blue waters. I think we succumbed to this sort of the same thing that you're saying is like, hey, this makes so much sense. Where I think we struggled was, if I'm gonna make some assumptions about the audience of tea drinkers and where we were targeting, is the subscription and the site in general really skews towards the long tail enthusiasts, where there's the 1% where they're vocal, they're gonna actually go on and write reviews. There's people that have hundreds, if not thousands, of tasting notes that they've logged on Steepster. So people like that it's such a core part of their life. That is mostly the audience, and they generate of Steepster, and they generate a ton of the content. But our subscription service, we were looking at it and saying, we need to target the new tea drinkers. We want to get people, we want to try to get them started on that journey to enthusiasts, because we had an assumption that was also largely what the traffic to the site was. Not the active users, but a lot of the search traffic that was coming to it. So it's, hey, if someone's not too familiar with tea, they're Googling what's the best green tea, something pretty basic in terms of what you can find in terms of green tea. Can we get them to land on our site, sell the subscription up front, get them trying new teas, start that journey? So it hit in maybe not the right spot, because the dedicated Steepster users that did sign up for it are people that have tried a bunch of teas. And we certainly did introduce new ones to them, but they have huge tea cupboards, and you'll see threads on Steepster of people doing photos. There's a whole cupboard thing. It's like they already have a bunch of tea, and they're already trying new teas on their own. So the subscription service became an added cost that wasn't proportionally adding a ton of value to them, because they're already searching that out on their own. And frankly, they'd be like, I can't drink this. I have too much tea. And tea lasts a really long time. It would go bad or something. So we missed them. There was still some contingent that was sticking with us because they're dedicated Steepster users, appreciated it being a free service for a long time. And so they're helping us out and getting some value of it. But so we missed them, and then still we're never able to crack that nut of like, how do we get that person that is less familiar with tea, maybe only had tea bags, and really convert them into a tea enthusiast that's interested in premium loose leaf tea. And we never really figured it out, unfortunately. So we kind of missed both parts of the curve.
Yeah, you said it there. You're going to run the gamut of people who are way into tea, cupboard full of tea, and they probably know as much about it as anybody, down to brand new people coming on the site who are like, hey, I've tried a couple teas, I like them, let me go find more. Hey, here's this Steepster site with a whole bunch of people who've got great information. So you're having to deal with people who are at various stages of engagement in tea, I guess, is the way to say it, right?
Yeah, I would also say that it's like, I don't think it's impossible to come into a vertical and figure it out and understand the customers and create a successful business. But I would say one thing that kind of at times really helped us out, but at times worked against us was we were inherently technologists and product people. The other co-founder, who was the real tea enthusiast, he eventually left. He became on good terms, but he wanted to pursue writing, so he's a full-time author. But maybe there's something to that we weren't the best example of tea drinkers and weren't as connected into that vertical or that industry as we could have been. And we were thinking of it more of, hey, how do you do this as a business? How is this something that can be licensed and applied across different verticals or different enthusiast groups? Which I think it's still a valid way to approach a problem and approach a business, but maybe there's something there that we just were just enough removed from the audience to not figure out that last piece of the puzzle, or to find that key to unlock that customer base. But maybe that's part of it.
Yeah. It's you gotta keep testing, refining, and adjusting. That's always been the name of the game. No different here, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners who have been going through this are doing exactly the same thing, just trying to continually adjust to whatever that customer need is. And it's not the same today. Even if you do figure it out, they'll change, and you got to change along with them. So that's always part of the challenge.
Yeah, I think something that the other way of saying what I just said too is what I think something that will make a lot of subscriptions much more successful is if you have these really dedicated, passionate people, that it's that entrepreneurial spirit, or it's that passion that comes in. And basically, if you're working in something and you're not going to let it fail, you learn from that. You fail a ton and you get better and you iterate and you evolve, but you just don't stop. And that's really so much of what business is. Like we were lucky enough to have successes early in our career, but as I look at the entirety of my career so far, I see that it's mostly like a bunch of stuff that takes years and years to work, and eventually you start figuring some things out and you get enough wins together and you start building something. So I think it applies with everything, but especially subscriptions. If like you're passionate and you're not going to let yourself fail, like you keep trying. It doesn't mean not everyone's going to make it. I wish that was the case, but that it's just a matter of passion and trying.
You are so right. And that end up getting stories written about them, or you end up reading articles about, or documentaries, those are usually the ones that made it, right? And so even they had struggles along the way, and there were thousands of other ones that'll never have stories written about them that at some point along the way either decided to, pivot and go a different direction, or fold up, or do whatever the case might be. But you're so right. It's just, we're all going to have obstacles. We're all going to have days where it feels like, man, I'm not sure if this makes sense anymore. Figuring out what you need to adjust and plowing through, that's 99% of it right there.
Yeah, I may be an outdated example at this point, but what popped in my mind was the Zynga example. I'm not remembering the right number, but I think it was something to the effect of if their 50th game or their like 300 or 600th game or something like that. The numbers may be wrong, but essentially they did a bunch of games that all failed until I think they hit Farmville. And that's definitely dated at this point. But they created a whole gaming empire, which has since collapsed. But like, it took them a bunch of tries, and like they just kept doing it, and eventually one hit. Like there's a cumulative effect, I think, of learning from all those failures that doesn't guarantee success, but certainly can make it more likely.
Yeah, absolutely. And not to go completely down this rabbit hole, but as an alternative example to this, a documentary I watched recently about a business that made no sense from the beginning and still doesn't make sense was the WeWork documentary. I don't know if you've seen it, but it is fascinating to watch because the economics of it never made sense. They probably still don't, though they've been sold, but they just had a founder who was super passionate, who made everybody around him believe this was the best thing since sliced bread. And a lot of people were going, you're a real estate company. And he said, we are not a real estate company enough times and strongly enough that people started to believe them. Yeah. But guess what? They were always a real estate company.
That WeWork's a very interesting one. Yeah. Sometimes you can just force it through. Certain people are that way. They have that gift. They have that skill where you sort of conjure things from thin air just by saying it.
Conjure is a good word to use. I'm pretty sure that's what he did. He conjured a business. He didn't build one. Yeah. Well, Jason, this has been a very fun conversation, and I appreciate all of the background and everything you've shared about your journey and the businesses that you've worked on. If any of the listeners today have any questions about what we've talked about or just are interested in getting in touch with you, how can they do that?
That's a great question.
You're easy to find on LinkedIn.
I am on LinkedIn. That would be probably a good place to reach out because I don't have my Steepster email anymore. So that wouldn't be a good place. But yeah, LinkedIn would be good. Jason Roos, ROOS. I've had some people reach out about tea stuff. So I'm more than willing to chat about that or subscription or any of the other mini failures along my path so far. I'd like to consider one in the same, but
yeah, I do too. That's a good way to look at it.
Hopefully my ramblings have provided some insight on some stuff. Hopefully some people find them valuable, but
I know it has for me, and I trust it has for the listeners as well. So thanks again, Jason.